I just want to say something about why it's been so important that we've been able to maintain this campaign of ours over the past almost 6 months. Over the past 6 months, on a global scale, a movement has emerged in defense of the Palestinian people. And we must not underestimate for one moment the sheer scale of this movement and how significant it is. And we may be a small part of it, but we're playing our part too. This movement is a movement based on solidarity and compassion and the defense of the most basic of human values. It's a movement based on defense of the most basic of human rights, the right to life. And in doing this, our movement has had to challenge what is possibly one of the most powerful political blocs in human history, the American, Israeli, Anglo-European bloc, the military bloc that is determined to pursue its own interests, to pursue its own agenda at whatever cost to the rest of humanity. So in defending the people of Palestine, we're not only defending them, we're also defending some very fundamental rights that play an important part in our lives too. And we have to recognize that the people who we are opposing hate what we are doing. They hate the fact that we are able to come together, to organize, to defend these very important human values. And in that process, they are prepared to take away some of our most basic freedoms, some of our basic civil rights, our right to express freely our opinions, our right to assemble and to meet and to protest. So, whilst we're defending the people of Palestine, we're also engaged in an important campaign to preserve rights that have been fought for and won over the centuries and which we must not allow to be taken away. So this is why it's so important that we come together again in a couple of weeks' time and think about our strategy, think about how we take our campaign forward into the future. Together we will win. Venceremos. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Abigail. She says she can perfectly do it by herself, so
if you're here today, sorry, thank you for being here, and I'm going to take about 10 minutes of your time. That's all. If you're here today, I assume you know what Israel is doing in Gaza. I'm pretty sure that, like me, you feel angry and helpless. All healthy feeling human beings resonate with the indescribable shock, loss, fear, confusion, pain, and suffering that the genocidal settler colonial state of Israel is inflicting on our fellow human beings. I was born, raised, and educated in Israel. My grandparents on my mother's side were Holocaust survivors, and I served in the Israeli military, in the Israeli army between 1982 and 1984. In 2001, 10 years after emigrating to Australia, I renounced my Israeli citizenship in protest. These credentials do not give me more right to speak here than anyone else, but they do mean that I'm fluent in Hebrew and I can watch and read the Israeli media. I also have some insight into Jewish-Israeli society, its psychology and its aims. I do not misunderstand Israel and its intentions. I am not confused by what the misinformation disseminated by our media. I know what Jewish Israelis are saying inside their country to one another in Hebrew. I know what their media show them and how they portray Gaza and the Israeli military. Israeli society does not perceive the Palestinian people as human beings. When Israeli Jews think about Palestinians, they see Nazis, monsters who want to annihilate all Jews. If this sounds insane to you, it's because it is. But this is how we were all indoctrinated in Israel. Psychologically, Israeli society is like a cult. We have all been brainwashed to believe that the Jews are the greatest victims in human history, that the world will always hate Jews, and that Jews are not safe anywhere except in Israel. Survival of the Jewish people and protecting Israel are the most important principles in the lives of most Israeli Jews. Israeli Jews have access to world media, but the majority read and watch the Israeli media only. They do not want to see the images we see. They choose not to see their soldiers as the war criminals that we know they are. All over Israel, the military is portrayed as heroic, as the brave defender of Jewish people everywhere, not just in Israel. Israel is a product of the Zionist settler colonial project. Zionism began in the late 19th century. Its ultimate goal is and always has been to replace every last Palestinian with Jews all over historic Palestine. Israel has tried many leaders since 1948. They have each done their best to push the Palestinians into ever diminishing territories. Successive Israeli governments on the left and on the right have done everything possible to make Palestinian lives so unbearably hellish in the hope that they would leave voluntarily. This has not worked. The timing of the attack on Gaza was no coincidence, and neither is the fact that Netanyahu was brought back from the brink of prison and re-elected as prime minister. Israeli Jews have no illusions about Netanyahu. They know who and what he is. They rightly see him as the only one who has what it takes to finish the job and solve the Palestinian problem once and for all. Israeli society has grown increasingly impatient and worried about what they call the demographic time bomb. There are now as many Palestinians in historic Palestine as there are Jews. The birth rate among Israeli Jews has been in decline, which is why Israel has also escalated its effort to entice Jews from Western countries to move to Israel. The humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza is not an accident of war. It is Israel's goal. The indiscriminate bombings, the flattening of Gaza, the destruction of everything that was part of Gaza's residents' life are deliberate. The wholesale murder of children and babies, sick and disabled people, men, women of all ages is intentional. The famine, the systematic destruction of hospitals is intended to cause widespread disease, suffering, and death. Israel is creating this horror in Gaza to force the world to take in the Palestinian refugees. Israel hopes that there will be a tipping point beyond which Egypt will be bribed by the United States to let Gaza's refugees into Egypt. Israel does not care if Gaza's people are just dumped in the Sinai desert. Israel couldn't care less what happens to any Palestinian. It just wants them all out. It will escalate until it has achieved its goals. Inside Israel, everyone knows it. Just like their ancestors who were ethnically cleansed in 1948, Gaza's refugees will never be allowed back. In 1948, Israel ethnically cleansed 750,000 Palestinians. It deliberately and systematically destroyed 500 villages and towns to ensure that the refugees would have nothing to return to. This is not based on speculation. There is plenty of evidence. Please read any of Professor Ilan Pape's books, especially The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine or 10 Myths About Israel. I hear in our media some talk occasionally about rebuilding Gaza after the war.